Colonization wasn't bad, or was it? Hey, I'm Bisi Akins, and in today's episode of All Things Africa, we are going to explore all there is to know about the Scramble for Africa. So let's get right into it. Before colonization, Africa was made up of about 10,000 different states and autonomous groups with very distinct cultures and languages. To Western society, Africa was referred to as the Dark Continent because it was a vast, unexplored place they knew nothing about but needed access to and were going to ensure that they found a way in. The formal beginning for the Scramble for Africa can be marked by the Berlin Conference, which took place between 1884 to 1885. It was the invasion, division, and annexation of most of the African continent by the 7 major Western European countries, which were Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, Portugal, Italy, and Spain. This was all part of a period known as the New Imperialism from 1881 to 1914. And by the end of the Scramble, almost 90% of Africa was colonized except for Liberia and Ethiopia. Now you're probably wondering why they did this. How did they manage to capture a whole continent with so many people and such rich histories and cultures? Well, in the name of exploration, the 19th century saw many expeditions to map out the interior of Africa. Many men like Henry Stanley discovered raw materials and resources that could be used to fuel the Industrial Revolution, which was already in full effect back in Britain. From the initial discoveries and on behalf of their nations, men like Henry began to claim territories on the continent, with King Leopold II of Belgium being the catalyst. Once one country started, everyone else quickly followed suit. So how did they actually claim these territories? Well, basically, they decided to put their flag down on the lands that they discovered without any regard for the inhabitants. It sounds crazy, but that's exactly what happened. This, however, caused major conflicts amongst the Western European countries about who could claim the most land. So in attempts to resolve this and bring some sort of order to the chaos, they decided to meet up and divide the continent amongst themselves. This major link-up was the Berlin Conference and the answer to their Africa problem. A total of 13 European countries and the United States came together to decide how they would colonize Africa by taking territory and power from the pre-existing states. The Western countries found it so difficult to comprehend that Africans had been existing without them, so they branded Africans as uncivilized to enable their lack of regard and dismissal for what had already been established on the continent. A series of events unfolded, and to ensure the plans of the colonizer could go ahead, they used a humanitarian facade which was presented to the public to cover up their actions by condemning issues such as the slave trade, prohibiting the sale of alcoholic beverages and firearms to regions in Africa, and expressing concern for missionary activities. With this facade, no questions were asked. To everybody looking in, it looked like everything was going good. But in actual fact, what they were really doing was outlining the terms and conditions for seeking and conquering colonies. They agreed to the following. No nation was to stake claims in Africa without notifying other powers of its intentions. No country could officially claim land until they had effectively occupied it, which meant that they had to invest a lot of money into that area. The area along the Congo River was to be administered by Leopold II of Belgium as a neutral area known as the Congo Free State, in which trade and navigation were to be free. However, many of the rules that they agreed on were completely ignored when it was convenient to them. It was very much every man for themselves, which meant that they were left to their own devices in ruling however they wanted and saw fit. So how exactly was Africa divided then? Well, Britain gained dominant control across the African continent, from Egypt to South Africa, as well as Nigeria and the Gold Coast. The French occupied vast areas of West Africa, while the Germans controlled modern-day Tanzania and Namibia. The Portuguese exerted power over Angola and Mozambique, and the Italians took part of the Horn of Africa, Eritrea, Libya, and Somalia. Leopold II of Belgium, he established control over the Congo Free State, a large area in Central Africa, which he considered as his own personal property rather than a colony of Belgium. He exploited the Congo's resources, particularly rubber and ivory, through forced labor and brutal tactics, leading to widespread human rights abuses, including enslavement, mutilation, and mass killings. His rule over the Congo Free State is often remembered as one of the most exploitive and brutal periods in Africa's colonization. Let us know if you would like to know more about that in another episode. Success in conquering was relatively easy for the European nations because they had all previously made agreement not to sell modern weapons to any Africans in potential areas they wanted to colonize. This meant that Europeans held a technological and weaponry advantage over Africa. So even if the strongest of the native African men wanted to fight to defend their land, many of them would have ended up dead before things even heated up due to the blatant unfair advantage the European colonists had. Out of all of the colonizers, Britain gave the most from the scramble and emerged with the largest overseas empire. Between 1885 to 1914, it had nearly 30% of Africa's population under its control, compared to France's 15%, Germany's 9%, Belgium's 7%, and Italy's mere 1%. Nigeria alone contributed 15 million subjects, which is more than the whole of the French West Africa and the entire German colonial empire. With borders clearly defined, the European colonists focused their attention on managing and invested in the parts of Africa that they controlled. They built facilities such as railways, canals, telegraph cables, irrigation systems, and public utilities to make governing their newfound lands easier, whilst enhancing trading opportunities and defending their territories against their rival colonial powers. So with all this being said, was colonization bad? Now, some people may say that colonization wasn't bad at all. I mean, if you think about it, they did develop infrastructure such as roads and railways. They brought new ideas on education and medicine, even though they brought diseases with them too. But that's a story for another day. Their actions, however, no matter how commendable, left the continent broken and lost, with centuries of historical evidence destroyed. They divided families, leaving many from the same tribes on separate sides of European-imposed borders, totally disrupting the lives of Africans. Changes were not only physical, they were economical, social, and political, creating rifts amongst those who were once neighbors, resulting in increased dependency of African countries on their colonizers. Alright, so I know that was a lot of information to take in, so let's take a little break. What exactly did we learn in this episode? Well, firstly, pre-colonization, Africa had many autonomous groups with distinct cultures, languages, and ways of living. Secondly, the scramble for Africa was for selfish gains and fueled the development of Western European nations, especially Britain. And thirdly, the Berlin Conference was the decision of a select few that brought chaos and division to a continent, resulting in the Africa we know today. Which African country gained their independence last? Was it Ghana, South Sudan, or Eritrea? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below and you will find out the answer in the next episode. Now, it's really important for us to highlight and understand both sides to this story. We have often been taught about the history of colonization without the African context. The negative impact of colonization was far greater than imagined, especially as the full extent and real cost to Africa has often been overlooked. Knowledge and awareness of this helps to put things into perspective and aids the understanding that the many present-day issues of the continent are a direct result of this period of time. So again, we ask, colonization wasn't bad, or was it? I'll leave that to you to decide. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you've enjoyed learning about the Scramble for Africa, which I'm sure you have, why don't you like the video, comment and share your thoughts below, and most importantly, don't forget to subscribe for all things Africa.